Good evening and welcome to the Queen's Student Alumni Association's first speaker panel of the new year, the 21st Century Workplace, Careers, Culture, and COVID-19. On behalf of the entire executive team, we are incredibly excited to have you here with us today. My name is Shasha Vijayaratne and I use she, her pronouns. I'm in the 5th year in the Geography and Planning Department and I'm the Director of Student Transition. On behalf of the Student Alumni Association, I would like to begin by acknowledging our presence on Indigenous lands across Turtle Island from wherever you might be accessing this event. While all of us here are encouraged to honor the history of the land from your respective location, it is my responsibility to reflect about QSAA and the privileges we experience as a result of a colonial project. Queen's University and the organization that represents this institution have deep colonial roots, and it is only through colonialization and destruction that I have the ability to learn, work, and play on these lands and waterways. We need to be open to the truths of the past and be willing to listen, learn, and attempt to understand our own positions and what has come to us as a result of those who came before. I urge us all to consider our own positionality as we gather online today. Now, before we continue, we have a brief slide from the Queen's Community Connections program. June, take it away.
Hello, thank you. My name is June. I'm in my first year of the Commerce program at Queen's University. I'm a QCCP volunteer, and I'm joining you today to share a very meaningful volunteer opportunity with the Queen's Community Connections program.
Program matches older alumni who may be a bit socially isolated with current Queen's students. And what we see is magic happen. Learn more at your advancement office at Queen's University. Make sure to sign up and get involved. These relationships are ones that last, and it's all part of the Queen's community, keeping connections together.
In short, student and young alumni volunteers are invited to help foster intergenerational connections, which is a unique strength of the Queen's community, and reduce social isolation by connecting regularly over the phone with senior alumni. As a volunteer caller, you'll get to know them, find out how they're doing, and generally just have a friendly conversation. Personally speaking, this has been a very meaningful and positive experience. And one of the callers that I've been matched up with is Christopher. He enjoys bird watching and photography, and he sends me photos of the cute birds that visit his backyard every day. It's been interesting talking with him about his experience at Queen's University when he was my age. It's also been a great experience to give back to my community. For example, the other day, Christopher told me that he got a shoulder injury from moving heavy furniture by himself. I asked if he had any friends or family nearby that could help him with the heavy lifting instead, but he explained that they all live too far away. So I took this problem to the QCCB team, and they helped me collect a list of resources Christopher could call if he ever needed help doing some heavy lifting or other maintenance around the house. Overall, this is a great program for students interested in becoming more immersed in the Queen's community. The QCCP can also be a terrific resume building and networking opportunity. Your contacts can give good insights, and participants may have the opportunity to get LinkedIn recommendations from Queen's staff. If you're interested in learning more about QCCP and joining as a caller, please check out the online sign-up form by scanning the QR code shown at the bottom right of your screen. Don't hesitate to reach out to the QCCP team at connectionsproject@queensu.ca with any questions you might have. Thank you very much. And now I'll pass it back to Shasha.
Thank you, June. And now we are going to begin the panel portion of the event, and I will hand it over to our host and QSAA's very own External Director of Volunteers, Manat Singh.
Hi, everyone. My name is Manat Singh. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a third-year student at the Smith School of Business. I'm the Director of Volunteers with an EDI specialization. Let me introduce today's panelists. First up, we have Ekky Manoilenko. Ekky graduated from Queen's University with a Bachelor of Arts honors degree in Health Studies. During her time at Queen's, she was a dedicated student to various on-campus initiatives, including the Queen's Student Alumni Association. During her time at QSAA, she received the Volunteer of Distinction Award. After graduation, Ekky worked in public relations at Lululemon and later received her Master of Business Administration from the Ivy Business School at Western University. Ekky has worked as the Senior Analyst of Strategy and Operations for Aritzia and is currently the Manager of Operations from ARON Industries, the family office of Andrea Thomas Hill and Brian Hill, the founder and CEO of Aritzia. Ekky speaks 4 languages and is passionate about arts and culture, education, and giving back to her community. Next up, we have Jennifer Reynolds. Jennifer works in equity, diversity, and inclusion at Maple Leafs Sports and Entertainment, where she leads the Toronto Maple Leafs EDI initiatives. In this role, Jennifer is implementing an integrated approach to promote inclusion and engagement through the Leafs organization, as well as throughout Leafs fan base and broader hockey ecosystem. Jennifer's passion for inclusion and community involvement extends far beyond her work at MLSE. For the past 6 years, she has served as co-chair of the Canadian board of You Can Play, a nonprofit organization that promotes inclusion in sports for LGBTQ2S+ athletes. Jennifer was an inaugural fellow with the University of Toronto's leading Social Justice Fellowship. Jennifer holds a CPA/CA designation and a Bachelor of Commerce degree from Smith School of Business. Lastly, we have Joel Greaves. Joel is the founder and CEO of Somewhere In, a new nature-inspired hospitality brand. Somewhere In is an intersection of several passions of Joel's: travel and hospitality, the great outdoors, and mental health advocacy. For him, the company was born out of the idea that leaving urban environments to spend extended time in nature with friends and loved ones is critical to our well-being. He's also a Bachelor of Commerce graduate from Queen's. Joel started his career in the telecom industry, where he led several product and marketing teams over the span of 12 years. In parallel, Joel quietly became a serial entrepreneur, purchasing Toronto-based luxury property maintenance company Zebrano Concierge in 2016 and building a successful cottage rental business in Muskoka. In 2021, Joel made the decision to leave telecom industry and pursue a lifelong dream of becoming a full-time entrepreneur. After closing an angel-backed raise, Joel moved to Calabogie, joining a growing community of like-minded entrepreneurs, and began working on Somewhere In. Thank you, panelists, for joining us today. We're looking forward to hearing your unique experiences. With that said, let's get into the questions we have for today. So for question 1, we named the event Careers, Culture, and COVID-19. And in line with this, we'll start with your careers. How did you get into the career that you're currently in? What, if any, challenges did you overcome to get into it?
First of all, nice to meet you, everyone. Thanks so much for joining, and super excited to be back, although virtually, but still at Queen's and with QSAA and with such impressive co-panelists. In terms of my career, so it has been a very unlinear path that I've taken in the past almost 6 years that I've graduated from Queen's. So as you maybe could have seen, that my degree is in health studies. I eventually worked in a couple of jobs in Toronto that kind of didn't feel completely right. Ended up moving out west, got a job at my dream company, Lululemon, at the time. That's where I learned that I love business and I love the intersection of business and fashion. And this is where I decided to pursue my MBA, because I just really wanted to get more on the business side, even though I worked on public relations, which was pretty cool and fun. But then, and while I was doing my MBA, I just really, really wanted to go back to fashion. Then, although I kind of was open to different avenues, but fashion always felt like kind of my, like my calling almost. And even though sometimes it felt like it's the industry that is a bit more about like beauty, it's just more, it's not like necessarily like helping serve the world's hunger or anything very deep like that, but it's just something that I truly, truly am passionate about. So I ended up pursuing an opportunity with Aritzia, and recently, as of November, moved into this completely different world for me, which is the world of wealth management and combined with philanthropy for the office of our Aritzia CEO. So very non-linear path, but at the same time, what I've learned throughout this time, or like through pursuing different passions, is that although sometimes it feels like there are like right decisions or wrong decisions, the ones that really you feel right about, they will be the ones that are right. So with my, you know, pursuit of fashion, I just knew that it will work out for me at some point, but there I had to overcome a lot of doubts, especially, you know, like even like self-doubt, and have studied health and have studied global development. I realized, you know, there's so many causes in the world that I could be working towards, but if I'm not as, you know, like deeply passionate and about them in the moment, maybe that's not the right path for me to pursue. So yeah, I guess for me it was just always about like really truly being, you know, honest with myself about what I want to pursue, and it also kind of embrace the evolution of the career, like embrace the challenge of, you know, not just getting somewhere and just feel like you're going to be there for a long time, but just, you know, listening to your when it tells you to maybe make a change or make a move. Again, I don't feel like I feel like I was really, really fortunate to not have to have like overcome like external challenges, but there are a lot of the internal challenges that I'm sure a lot of us face. That's what was kind of like my main hurdles. But I feel like the right people, the right support network and mentors, and, you know, education too. Sometimes I just need to get another degree to figure it out. So there's a lot of ways, but just embracing that like passion non-linear path is kind of mine. So yeah.
Yeah, so my name's thanks Manan, thanks Ekky. My name's Joel. Yeah, and I'm the founder and CEO of a hospitality brand called Somewhere In. And really the manifestation of that in its current form is we're a boutique hotel in Calabogie, Ontario, which, if you don't know where that is, it's in the Ottawa Valley, 4 hours from Toronto, about an hour from Ottawa. And really what we're about is, you know, getting people out of the city and experiencing nature, hiking, skiing. You know, we're actually leading some experiences and excursions for ice fishing right now. But really getting people outdoors and, you know, into the therapeutic environment of being in the outdoors. And so that getting to this place in the pandemic was actually pretty, you know, crazy. A lot of people thought we were crazy. Starting a hospitality brand in a pandemic is not what you know, a lot of investors look for. So believe it or not, I was actually going to leave my job in March 2020. I was thinking really, really strongly about doing it. My wife and I had kind of set ourselves up financially that I was going to do it. And then in, you know, of course, you know, 2 weeks into that month, the pandemic hit. And so the investors that we had that were interested said, like, you know, this seemed like a good idea, but like the entire hospitality industry in the world is absolutely just got decimated. So like, you know, maybe you should stay at your job, which I did for another year. But something really interesting happened. Well, you know, I stayed at my job. In the summer of 2020, we started seeing this phenomenon of, you know, the urban hotels in Toronto and Ottawa were completely empty, but the rural hotels were just completely packed. They were having record years. And so that really validated it for us. Like the business model that we thought existed pre-pandemic was actually even stronger, because more than ever, people were, you know, locked up in their homes. They wanted to get out and do something. And so we kind of restarted our conversations with our investors, you know, put it into high gear to find a place to buy, and put together all of our life savings, bought a smaller place than we had intended to originally, but eventually closed on a property in March of 2021 and redeveloped it. I have no experience in hospitality, so I'm completely learning on the fly. I moved to Calabogie and like became the general manager of this this crazy place for about a year, and I just moved back to Toronto. I have a general manager running it. It was pretty crazy ride, but I think the pandemic has only strengthened, a lot of the core principles that we thought, existed before it came along.
Hey everyone, Jen Reynolds here. I love this this theme, like unconventional career paths, that non-linear route. So happy to share a little bit more about myself. And for my introduction, you might be wondering, okay, how did this person get from studying commerce and then working in accounting and now working in inclusion in the sports industry? It's an interesting story. I can share a little bit of insights there, but I've been pretty fortunate to carve my own path. And when I was at university at Queen's, I didn't know really what I wanted to do with my life, but going to commerce, getting my accounting designation seemed like a good thing to do. So I did that. My parents approved, and it was like, okay, off to Toronto I go. I spent the first 5 years of my career working in professional services between KPMG and Deloitte, and it was good, but I always had a sense that I could be doing something more. I'm very much an individual who's driven by making an impact. So through some community volunteering opportunities that I had through a nonprofit, I was able to get an inside look into Maple Leaf sports and entertainment. And I said, well, I love the Raptors. I love sports. Like, I just never thought that working in the sports industry would ever be a place for someone who doesn't have like a coaching position with the Raptors, or isn't a professional athlete. So I just never thought the sports industry had a spot for someone like me, but turns out they did. So 5 years into my career, I hopped over to Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, working in corporate strategy, and got to work on a bunch of different projects across the organization, helping our teams and businesses grow. And then COVID hit, a huge impact, as you can imagine, on sports and entertainment. We went from having packed arenas every night, 20,000 fans, to zero. Our teams weren't even playing. In the wake of this as well, there was the murder of George Floyd. And our organization, like many organizations across the world, came to a point where we realized that we needed to be doing something more for our communities, for our fans, for our employees. We hold such a position of power that we weren't doing enough. We'd always been active in the community, but never that outspoken, and nothing about social and racial justice. So we hired a senior vice president of inclusion. And I said, okay, having a senior vice president is one thing, but who's going to help them do the work? And I put my hand up for that. I said, hey, like, I've worked at this organization for 2 years. I know the good, bad, and the ugly, and I can help make this change. So if you looked at my resume, you wouldn't have necessarily thought I was the person for the job, but I advocated for myself. I found transferable skills, pulled those out from my resume and made that case to my bosses. So it's been a learning journey for me, but having that strong foundation, being able to advocate for myself and make things happen along the way. It's been a journey, but still learning as I go about. So happy to share a bit more with you all throughout the course of the night.
Thank you for sharing, panelists. We'll move on to our next question. What have been the highlights of your career? For the current undergraduate students in the audience, what would you recommend for getting into the industry?
Yeah, I like to think about careers, especially in the stage that I'm in now. So I'm 12 or 13 years out of Queen's, as like multiple acts. And so I'll talk about both of the acts of the play of my career. The first act, I worked for TELUS and then Rogers. And I was fortunate to take on roles across like a number of disciplines: product, marketing, partnerships, pricing. And those were very formative years for me, both from a skill set perspective, from an EQ, from an IQ side of things. I learned so much from so many great leaders that I took bits and pieces from. And I was able to travel to a ton of different places across the world. So I went to Tokyo, Seoul, Barcelona, Paris, London, Palo Alto, LA, Bellevue, and across Canada. And that was really, really fun when you're young. But then, you know, something kind of happened towards, you know, the latter half of that second half. And I got just fatigued of the entire environment. And one thing that I never appreciated, you know, until I was working in a big publicly traded company was you live in this cyclical quarterly environment. And so every quarter you need to wake up and hit your targets for that quarter. So everything's, you know, based on those 3 months. And so I lived through 47 quarters of like, you know, fighting against TELUS and Rogers and Bell, and like, you know, everyone's fighting for their fair share, and that kind of grinds you down. And I was very to have lots of success in my career. So, you know, I around and look at the people that were above me and the path that I was on. And a lot of them, frankly, looked kind of miserable. They seemed to have strained marriages, and they worked crazy hours. And so it really, you know, that was my signal to say like, all right, there's more out there, and it's time for my second act. And I'd always wanted to be an entrepreneur. For me, it was a matter of when, not if. And so I really, you know, shifted my focus to like, what's the career path that I can take where entrepreneurship is, you know, is it, and I can be my own boss. And so that's, you know, that's ultimately what led us to the, you know, the story of founding this hospitality brand. But I'm so grateful for the first act, like all the things I did, the experiences I had, what I learned. The pace of learning in a big corporation is so fast. Like what you learn in 4 years at Queen's, you learn in like 1 or 2 on a continual basis in a big company. And I just think that's just so powerful. So I wouldn't change it. It was just, you know, the right time to move on to the next thing. And then my advice would be, you know, think about your career in multiple acts. You don't have to have a figure. Then, like, I had no clue what I wanted to do when I, you know, graduated in 4th year. I figured it along the way and had help from some really good mentors. I'd also say, like, I've now so much appreciated the power of my network from Queen's. Like the friends I have that graduated with me are all in amazing careers and have really cool roles and have opened doors for me and been really great mentors to me. And that's just so powerful. I'm so grateful for that. And lastly, you know, whether it be hospitality or just if you want to become an entrepreneur, the most important thing is to have a really great support system, both like emotionally, like my wife is just such a rock for me in this because there's so many highs and lows, and financially. Like you got to set yourself up to know, like, you're not going to make a lot of money in the beginning, and you're going to sacrifice a lot. And I walked away from a career that was really good. But I'm so much happier having done it now. So yeah, that would be my advice.
Yeah, just building off of that, in summary, I would say my highlight is being able to make my passion into my profession. I'm sure many of you have heard that saying, you know, find something you love and you'll never work a day in your life. That's not true for me, at least. I work, and I work pretty hard, and not just hours wise, but the work that I do now, it requires me to show up emotionally and be an empathetic leader and advocate for people who haven't been heard. So I'm tired at the end of the day normally because I've had to have really tough conversations with leaders, telling them, hey, like, you need to do better in your hiring practices. You need to push this message out to your fans. So I feel fulfilled when I'm able to see the impact of what I'm doing, and whether that's be, you know, something that the Leafs have put out on their social media that I had a small part in helping with that community connection, or seeing someone come into our organization from a background that and a school that we don't normally look for, but knowing that we played a small role in helping them get into the sports industry, because maybe they weren't part of one of the top 2 to 3 schools that we normally do our recruiting at. So that leads me into my advice. The sports industry, as I said in my intro, there's so many different roles, sports and entertainment. You can study anything and break into it. We have people who did engineering and now are in charge of our ice maintenance, lawyers who are helping us with everything to do with legal, marketers who have come from so many different backgrounds, sales folks. Like, what you study at university doesn't define where you're going to end up. I've seen so many people make jumps throughout their career. It provides you with a good foundation of how to think. But I studied business, and I can't tell you that I reuse a lot of my like school business knowledge in the work that I do, but it was those times when I was working with a team and, you know, you're up against the 11:59 deadline and you all have to come together. So what is the role that you play on that team? It's being able to use your power of influence to be able to get approval for something, which we all know when working in those team environments that you got to push something forward that way. So it was a lot more of those softer skills that I learned in university that I still use today. So don't let what you study at school or your first job out of school define what you are able to do throughout your career. I'm still navigating it, and I've been graduated for almost 9 years now. So I'll leave it at that for now.
And thanks both. In terms of my experience, I feel like with highlights, I definitely find that there are some projects that, you know, like I love just being involved. Like when I just joined Aritzia, and I will already have been working for a couple of years up to then. But when I joined Aritzia, I really figured out that there is this combination of where I'm passionate about something, and as Jen said, like I work hard, and combined like the passion and the hard work and being surrounded by the people who are equally, you know, passionate and hardworking has been like an absolute highlight in itself. You know, like coming to work every day and you are just surrounded by people who you resonate with and who, you know, you have a common ground with. And it definitely has been like kind of like a perpetual highlight, but it took me a couple of different, you know, jumps and trying to figure out like maybe this company, maybe this type of role or another type of role. So yeah, that kind of like fluid approach in the beginning is totally okay. Like I, you know, like looking back, I was like, oh my gosh, I was in jobs maybe like sometimes like a year, maybe two, but then at the end of the day, like I looked at myself and I thought, oh my gosh, like I just like I don't seem to fit anywhere. And then once you find that fit, you automatically you're kind of like, wow, this is this is so like such a big highlight in itself. And then in terms of projects that I worked in when I was with Aritzia, I've also learned that I'm a builder. Like I love building systems, building programs, but the best type of systems or programs that I got to build were our internship program or a campus recruitment program. Because when I was in the shoes of people who, like you guys, you know, I was on campus like a couple of years before, and I was looking for fashion opportunities. I could barely find any. Like it was really hard to be, you know, out there trying to navigate this world of fashion, which seems kind of like, you know, it's only, again, like as Jen said with sports, it's like you think it's like the athletes are part of that world, but I'm like more of like business sided person, and I'm not a fashion designer. Like I've never been and never like, you know, wanted to be, or maybe I did want to be when I was a little kid, but that was a while ago. But you kind of learn that this is not my skill set, and my skill set is in building some sort of, you know, business structures. So it's kind of like getting to the place where I'm learning, like I love building things, and then ended up doing like building something meaningful that I also felt like resonates with me. And now Aritzia is now like hiring so much from campuses and going and, you know, meeting students. And obviously it's like a huge consumer brand, but it's also, you know, a very, very big employer now. And I mean, it has been a big employer, but like specifically of student talent. So for me, that was kind of like very cool, rewarding, like full circle situation. And then right now I'm working on, again, I'm helping build a foundation, like a charitable foundation for the family. And it's, again, like so exciting and so rewarding because I know that it will end up impacting a lot of people who need it, who need support. So it's, you know, yeah, like finding kind of like the mix of your skills with the mix of your passions sometimes it's like, so you don't like, I didn't know that I was a builder, like, until I started building things and compared to other people who were running things. I didn't know that I was, that passionate about, campus recruitment until I started working on that project. So it's kind of like the trial and error part. Yeah, my advice is just, like, when you have an opportunity, like, to dive into something, just don't shy away from it and just dive into it, because you never know, like, maybe that's where your passion lies.
And I want to thank all of you for sharing. Those are all such unique paths and awesome experiences. Moving on to the culture aspect of this conversation, were there any specific values that you looked for in a workplace before applying to it? And is your workplace conducive to your working style?
So I'm going to answer this question a little bit differently. I'm going to answer it, and if I were evaluating a company now, how would I look at its culture? Because when I entered MLSE 4 years ago, I didn't think that much about values. I thought, okay, this is a great place for me to start my career, and the shiny sports industry. I was pretty lucky that my values actually did end up aligning with my company's, but with everything that's happened with the combination of COVID and as I mentioned, the increased importance of social justice, we have an ability now as talent, let's call it, as employees, to hold our companies to a higher standard. So I would be looking at a company based upon 3 different things. First one is their community investment. What dollars are they putting into their community to support different organizations? Really looking for the dollars contributed, and also what they're doing with their employees to unlock time from a volunteer capacity for their employees. I think that a lot of organizations have a huge role to play, especially these big, large organizations with thousands of employees. There's a huge opportunity for them to make an impact, and their employees want to be actively involved in their community. So looking for the community impact. The second, I would say, is what their inclusion objectives are. And here I would want to say, let's look past like written statements and words and more into actions. There's been a lot of things that have been said by organizations, pledges that everyone's signed on to, but what's to show of that? Like, let's move on from words and go into action. So you might have to do some digging to see what organizations are doing, but we need to hold them to that higher standard. The third I would look into is mental health benefits. This has been huge for me throughout the course of the past 2 years, tapping into my therapist. And that's been a conversation that used to have a lot of stigma around it. And now I know that a lot of my friends and family seek support for their mental health. And I was proud to see that my organization significantly upped their medical coverage for mental health practitioners this past year, which was really important. So there might be some aspects of the health and wellness space that are more important to you, but if you're applying to an organization, sometimes they have that listed on their website, but don't be afraid to ask about it. I think it will make everything a lot more valuable to you once you actually get into the organization. So those are just some three top things that I would be looking at an organization now from a values perspective.
I couldn't agree more with you, Jen. I think all of those 3 are, they're vital, especially I find the mental health component, and it's just so important to feel like the organization has your back in this, like it's like Aritzia has this like partnership with Headspace app. Then obviously we have benefits for, different from different practitioners, and just like knowing that it's a continuous conversation that the leaders of the organization will be like, they will be starting it and not employees will be demanding it. Like, it's a conversation that comes like top to bottom as opposed to bottom up. And it's very, like, I would definitely be looking out for those actions that companies do as well. I will take a little bit different approach with answering this question. I think when it comes to large organizations, it's really, like, I joined a few large organizations in the past, and I've, branding and the way they portray themselves in the media, the way they portray themselves on their website is just so like it's beautiful. It resonates with you automatically. They use writers to like write the statements, and it is like, although it could be true, but sometimes, like most times, the best way to go about like finding the true values of the organization is by talking to the people who work in the organization, and also by obviously working there. But the best, like when you are evaluating, if you want to join a certain team, like I could not just tell you that you have to look into the values of the company. You have to talk to the team and ask them what their values are, because ultimately you're going to be working with them day in and day out. And when I just recently joined the team of the family office, my immediate manager, when I just connected with her, I just realized like she hits all the values that I want in a manager. And by that, I mean, like, she's a human first and foremost. Like she treats herself as a human first, but meaning that she can share about her personal life. She asks about my personal life. And for me, it's very important because I realize I'm a human being first, and then I'm a worker second. And sometimes we forget that, at work, we just need to show up as the employee, which is, in my case, like I need the personal touch. Then obviously like this high performing, motivated, sharp kind of culture, where like a culture of a person who just like expects so much of themselves. So I automatically pick it up and I expect this much of myself as well. So I thrive in the environments where I just like people expect a lot from each other, and from themselves first, and then from each other as well. So, and the last piece, and I think it's the curiosity. I don't know. I find I'm best with people who seem to be always open to learning about different ways, learning about different different approaches to work. And I'm really fortunate with my team right now because everybody is, although everyone's super competent, but the competency doesn't negate curiosity. You have like the two work best together. And I think that's how great work is accomplished, is when you are continuously curious, able to change or able to adopt new ways. So so these are kind of like my ways of looking for the leader to work with, rather than, again, specifically the company. But in order for you to know that, you have to speak with them. You have to dig in and ask their team maybe what those people's values are.
Yeah, I think you guys or girls have done a really good job of summarizing this. So I'll just put a explanation point on a couple of things you said. So Jen, totally agree. It's about looking at the values of the company, and I think the three that you highlighted are really, really important. And Ekky, totally agree that the leader is important in that, because what I have found in my experience is I have worked for some leaders that, despite the amazing values that the company might have, those leaders don't live those values every day. And they've let me down in ways that like I've been very disappointed. And so I think it's so important that when you're doing the due diligence and you are in a place in your career where you can talk to the leader and you have to say who your leader is going to be, that you spend that time to really understand who they are. And like, it's not just like, hey, do we think we can work well together? It's like, does that leader have a reputation for living the values that are important to me? Do they have a reputation for, hiring, developing, and promoting women and members of the BIPOC and LGBTQ plus community? Like, those are really important things that, like, have they actually lived them? Or is it just something that they like, get the message from HR that says like, hey, I gotta have this talk now. So that's always been really important to me, because you know what? People that live those, really important, like top 3 values that Jen talked about, all the other stuff, like there's so many good things that come, easily to them as well. And so, yeah, that's been the most important thing to me.
Thank you, panelists. Thank you so much for sharing those valuable and awesome advice and experiences. I am definitely learning, and the audiences, I'm sure. Moving on to the fourth question. COVID-19 pandemic remains a challenge to many new graduates who are looking to enter the workplace. Could you give us an inside look into the shifts in work structure or operations that you've experienced?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the shifts that I've noticed primarily have been with regards to flexibility. I think what I've noticed with Aritzia, for example, is that before, again, like fashion is such an industry, it's like it's a very in-person industry because you are kind of expected to be contributing to, you're expected to be in office because the clothes are made in office, and everything is, and retail being kind of like a very it's an environment where you're in person as well. So the company has always tried to be in person as much as possible, but then pandemic kind of opened the possibilities for it to be more remote, and therefore attract more talent from different areas of the country, which has been, again, really, really great for the company. I find with I've learned a lot about myself with the in and out of office experiences. So we've had, like Aritzia first closed its offices completely, then it gradually reopened, then it was closed again, that it was open for a while, but then kind of like it became more of a hybrid model. So I think, obviously, like maybe it's like repeating what is said in the media, but you learn that you sometimes can either work all day, or sometimes you're really unable to work because you're at home. And I've learned, for example, I'm sure you as students as well, like you've learned that if you can't go to school, like you can't go to class, you have some sort of like you're like experiencing like almost like blockages within yourself, then you can't like stop, let's say, studying, or like you can't start studying. So it's not, I find like this, like my personal experience, like it taught me that I'm best at certain ways of working and I'm worse at other ways. Like an example would be, I do love the flexibility of like coming to the office and, and being with people, but I also love the flexibility of being, working by myself sometimes. So I don't know if I'm answering the question. The question is so right, but I think, it opened a lot of doors for people to start networking with people outside of their cities. And I feel that's what has been a huge bonus. Like I've talked to so many people in Toronto, though I'm in Vancouver, and employers are really, trying, like becoming more city agnostic, which is cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I would, I think Ekky, I think you've covered well the way we work is different. We spend a lot more time on Zoom calls, for example. Maybe I'll take this in a slightly different direction. One of the things I think has been really powerful and really great positive about the pandemic is that there's this like completely decentralized way of working now. And so people can work from absolutely anywhere. If you want to like live in, Muskoka because that's where you home is for you, or you love being, then like you could go work in Muskoka and work remotely full time. There's lots of companies that are headquartered all over North America. Shopify would be one that come out and said like, it doesn't matter where you live, we will hire great talent from anywhere. And I think that's really, really powerful. That's not, you used to be limited to like, I can only work in the places that basically are close for me to commute to. And now I can work just about anywhere. And that's, I think, really, really cool or really powerful. The other thing I think is really interesting about that is, especially for, as I reflect on my company, my extended team of individuals that I work with. So our branding agency, our designers, my social community manager, my PR and partnerships manager are all freelancers that have full-time jobs. And through our network, they've like their side hustle is to be a freelancer and work for us. So it's created this really cool freelance economy of like, if you're good at something or you're passionate about something, you can do that as a side hustle and, you know, and still have your full-time job. So I thought that's just been really powerful, and like we've benefited so much from that, and just we've had access to this amazing talent that I don't think maybe we otherwise would have in the past.
So I want to share a couple of stories here. So COVID-19 absolutely shut down sports and entertainment. Like I said, we had about 250 nights out of 365 like booked for events throughout the year. So we were pretty busy as an arena with Scotiabank here in Toronto. But with challenge comes opportunity. So two things that I want to highlight here that MLSE has been able to do that wouldn't have been possible if it weren't for the pandemic. We were able to put on a Bringing Toronto Back to Its Feet food program. So not only harnessing the food from our restaurants, but being able to tap into other food providers across the city, we use the Scotiabank arena like main floor, so where the Raptors and Leafs play, like the arena floor, we turned that into a kitchen. So we had volunteer employees, we were there packaging food, and we sent this food to frontline workers and community people who were in need of food and working on the front line. So we knew that as an organization, we were really good at getting large groups of people to help out with things in a large capacity space. So what we were able to do there was really impactful for the community. We also really like to set records. So in June, we were able to host a vaccine day. So we were able to get, I think it was 26,000 vaccines administered in just one day at Scotiabank Arena. So although our entire work operations have been interrupted, we've been able to make the most out of what we've been given and been able to do some good in the community and involve our employees there.
Thank you again, panelists, for sharing your experiences. That's very valuable for us. But moving on to the last question. In one sentence, panelists, what makes us feel united?
Yeah, this is a really good question. I would say the starting place for everything is gratitude, compassion, and empathy.
Beautifully said. I think for me, it's like building the world together with people and have an active, like feel like I'm an active member of the world, and you know, knowing that I contribute somehow, and then the rest of the people, we're all doing it together. So not as concise, but tried.
Yeah, for me, it's being able to work towards a common goal, and whether you fall short of that goal as a group or exceed it, being able to come together and be united, working towards one goal is what it's all about for me.
Your answers are so insightful. I wish we all could just keep speaking. But in light of time, I know that we have to stop here. A quick presentation from the QSAA's Giving Portfolio. A quick presentation from the QSAA's Giving Portfolio.
Hi everyone, my name is Aurora and I'm the Stewardship Ambassador at QSAA. I wanted to briefly discuss our Tricolor Giving Initiative. This initiative gives students the opportunity to contribute to the Queen's community through the fund chosen for that year. So this year, the Tricolor Giving Initiative is actually supporting two funds, the Indigenous Initiatives Fund and the Four Directions Student Center. These organizations were selected for their focus on education, diversity, and inclusion, and all donations will help nurture Indigenous culture, programming, and education at Queen's. You can find more information about both funds on our Tricolor Giving page.
Thank you all for joining us here today. We hope that you have a satisfying and worthwhile term. And thank you again, panelists.